Yeah, like I said, welcome. Thanks for coming out. It's always very good to see planning kind of translate into people showing up somewhere. This is our second year on campus, so we're very happy to be in presence and in person with y'all. So quick overview of the meeting today. We'll do a kind of shared 35-minute presentation on the intro event or on introduction to effective altruism. Just out of curiosity, how many of you guys have heard of effective altruism before or kind of engaged with it in the past? Yeah, sweet. Yeah, no worries if you haven't. That's why it's an intro event. And then after that, we'll go over a little bit of detail in our kind of main programming in the fall semester, which is the fellowship. Really kind of plug, hello, we're just getting started. Really plug the kind of the fellowship as our main programming this fall. That'll be more information on that shortly forthcoming. I'm just gonna get started. If you guys wanna, is this for books, David, or? Okay, sweet. Yep, no worries. Well, yeah, I think that's. All right. Yeah, so briefly, my name is Lenny. I'm the vice president of Effective Altruism Madison, and starting us off here. So one quote from a book called Strangers Drowning that has really struck a chord with me is, what do-gooders lack is not happiness, but innocence. They lack that happy blindness that allows most people, most of the time, to shut their minds to what is unbearable. Do-gooders have forced themselves to know and keep on knowing that everything they do affects other people, and that sometimes, though not always, their joy is purchased with other people's joy. Remembering that, they can no longer continue to live ignoring it. They feel an intense urge to dedicate their lives to helping. When there is so much suffering, injustice, and death in our world, and when there will be far more in the years, decades, and centuries to come, if we as a society don't get our act together, it can be overwhelming to think about the huge mess that the world is and what we can do to help. Before I arrived at college, I took a gap year to work and travel. At that point, I had never really encountered extreme poverty, and I existed in a pretty carefree state of mind, thinking about my happiness, my experiences, what was I going to study at college, what was I going to find a career in eventually, kind of average thoughts at that point of time. But when I landed in Nepal to do some backpacking there and walked the 1.5 hours from my hostel to my hostel in Kathmandu, my life really changed. For the first time, I witnessed extreme poverty. I saw children playing badminton on the rubble of an old storefront, presumably destroyed in the earthquake there in 2015. I saw women washing and drying their clothes in a river congested with trash and human waste. The thick blanket of smog over the entire city from the brick factories nearby. The experience really was stunning, and it changed my life. When I returned to the US and started going to college here, I understood that going to college and then finding a career wasn't just a privilege, it was really a huge opportunity. I learned about the millions of people who are already being partially affected by climate change. I learned that about 1 in 10 people live off less than $1.90 each day. I learned that there are over 72 billion land animals and over 1.2 trillion aquatic animals severely mistreated and killed for food each year. I learned that there are over 2 million Americans incarcerated, with incarceration rates being 6 times higher for Black Americans than white Americans. I learned, as we have all recently learned, of the threats posed by global outbreaks of disease and other risks that endanger generations to come. Learning about these problems, I felt really overwhelmed. There was so much work to do and so little guidance on how to best go about it, given our limited time, energy, money, work hours, our relationships. That's what intrigued me about effective altruism, an attempt to make the most of the limited resources we have, the limited resources we can offer to tackle the world's most pressing problems, an attempt to bring about long-lasting, sustainable change and create a future that we can be proud of. Effective altruism is a growing community and a philosophy based on asking the very simple question, how can we do the most good, doing our best to figure it out, and then acting accordingly. Many of us have been given immense privileges that we take for granted. How can we make the most of the opportunity that we have been given to make the world a better place? I hope that today's presentation will provide a useful foundation to think about this very difficult but very important question. I'll start off by discussing why it's important to prioritize between causes when deciding what to work on, what to donate to, what to be an advocate for. This is the idea of cause prioritization, the idea that you should actively compare different causes, figure out how much good you can do through each, and then mainly focus on the causes that, as best you can tell, offer us the best opportunities for doing good. Cause prioritization might seem crass, cold, or even unfair sometimes. Surely we might think, we don't want causes getting no support at all. Don't all causes deserve some support? I think the emphasis here should be shifted. Causes don't deserve support, people deserve support. Since some causes and interventions support people better than others, we need to prioritize these over others that we care about if we want to better support people. An example might make this more clear. Suppose that you have $1,000 you want to donate, and you're torn by two causes that you really care about: helping fund screenings to detect lung cancer and funding insecticide-treated bed nets to protect children from malaria. What if you treated both cases equally and you gave $500 to each? $500 is enough to scan about 2 people for lung cancer. On average, doing this gives about 10 additional days of life. At the same time, $500 is enough to produce and distribute 50 insecticide-treated bed nets. Each bed net usually protects 2 people, often children under the age of 5, from getting malaria for about 3 years. So with $500, you can protect around 100 children for 3 years from a disease that is fatal, debilitating, and tragically common. Or you can do the lung scan, which helps about 2 people and gives an average of 10 days of life. This graphic shows how many people we can significantly support with a $500 donation towards each of these causes. If we donate $500 to support lung scans, when we could have bought malaria nets for 100 children, then we're implicitly valuing and supporting 2 people to some degree over supporting 100 people to a larger degree. And that's just deeply unjust. This is why. Supporting all causes equally is unfair. When we care about all people, we need to prioritize the most effective causes and interventions that allow us to best support people. Not because the other causes aren't important, not because they aren't worth dedicating our lives to, but because our resources are limited. There's so much to do, and with every choice we make, people, potentially many people, bear the costs of what we didn't do. So it's very important that we prioritize between causes, but how should we go about doing this? It's actually far from obvious what the best interventions are. The following example demonstrates, hopefully, just how hard it can be to tell what way of helping is the most effective. So I'll give you a minute to think about which of these interventions you think increased school attendance the most in Kenya. And then also think about how much more effective you think the best of these interventions is compared to the worst intervention. Give you a moment on this. So the worst 2 performers were unconditional cash transfers and merit-based scholarships. Free uniforms was about twice as effective as merit-based scholarships. Deworming, which is providing medication to remove gastrointestinal worms from students, was about 20 times as effective as free uniforms. And informing parents about the benefits of education was about 50% more effective than deworming. So even with the good intention of trying to help, you can see that there's just vast differences in the effectiveness of different interventions that aren't necessarily intuitive. I give this example just to show how hard it is to determine what will work and what won't if we go with our guts. This is why it's so important to use evidence and careful reasoning to decide what to work on and what to donate to. Our intuitions alone aren't good enough here. This is in part because our intuitions are heavily influenced by what problems are most visible to us. But many of the worst injustices in the world are suffered silently and distantly. We need to look for them if we want to help end them. Another reason to be skeptical of our intuitions is that while our intuitions are great for many things, they're usually terrible at dealing with numbers, particularly very large numbers. A problem that affects thousands of people might feel similar to a problem that affects billions, but between them is actually a world of difference. This is often hard to grasp. Stalin once said that a single death is a tragedy, but a million deaths are a statistic. He was wrong in a way that we have to recognize. A million deaths are so much more than just a statistic. A million deaths are a million bundles of hope for the future cut short. A million families who will never get to see their loved ones again. A million moments of joy never experienced. A million deaths are a million tragedies, and we should treat them as such, even if our intuitive reactions can't feel anything close to the weight of a million tragedies. Our intuitions are often blind to distance and scale, but the world's problems know no such boundaries. So to find better opportunities to help, we need to look for and explicitly consider factors that make causes better or worse opportunities to help. What are some of these factors? So 3 factors that are especially useful for identifying the best opportunities to help are scale, neglectedness, and solvability. Scale refers to the number of people affected by an issue and how severely they're effective. We saw comparisons for interventions within a cause area earlier. That was the example with the deworming and the increased school years in Kenya. But we can also use this framework to compare between different causes. Consider the problem of ALS compared to climate change. Climate change is estimated to cause 150 deaths per year already, 150,000 deaths per year already, and it's likely to kill millions more in the coming years and displace more than 100 million individuals by 2050. In contrast, ALS is expected to kill roughly 180,000 people by 2050. So when it comes to scale, how many people are affected and how severely, climate change is the more important issue than ALS. It's not because ALS isn't important. ALS causes patients and those who love them to suffer greatly. I know this. But because our world has many tragedies, has many more tragedies than we have lifetimes to address. And scale suggests that allowing other problems to continue on their current paths would be turning our backs on even worse tragedies. We cannot avoid choosing between tragedies, but we can at least take care to choose the lesser tragedies. And considering scale helps us do this. Another factor to consider is solvability, which is sometimes called tractability. How much of the problem can we actually expect to solve? As we saw earlier, it's much more tractable to help to protect people from malaria than to protect people from lung cancer. Offering people insecticide-treated bed nets is much easier than performing expensive scans and treatments. The third factor to consider is neglectedness. How many resources, funding, careers, research, media coverage are going into an issue? Highly neglected causes are often better opportunities for impact due to diminishing returns. If a cause only has 100 others working on it, there's probably much more low-hanging fruit left better untapped opportunities to help than in a cause where thousands of people and billions in funding have already made use of the best opportunities to help. Consider the broad issue, very broad issue, of human well-being in comparison to the well-being of other animals. There are around 8 billion people on Earth compared to 72 billion farmed land animals and another 1.2 trillion aquatic animals killed for food each year. In the US, for every human, there are about 28 land animals raised and killed in factory farms each year, and they are subject to cruel treatment throughout their lives. Still, over 90% of philanthropic funding in the US goes towards human-centered causes. Even among the less than 3% going to non-human animals, most of the money goes towards shelters, while many more animals are mistreated in factory farms. So farmed animals are vastly more neglected than both pet animals and humans, while they are mistreated at a much larger scale. Another important point to note is that neglected causes often look weird. By definition, neglected causes are the ones that not everyone is talking about, and they often aim at improving the well-being of people or beings that usually aren't given much attention, such as people halfway across the world living in extreme poverty, farmed animals, and future generations even. So when an idea about improving the world is unintuitive or weird, it can actually be particularly important to take it seriously. On top of this framework for comparing causes, there are other considerations that may help us do good better. So I'll hand it off.
One of the most important lessons I've learned from Effective Altruism is to expand my compassion and think really hard about who we ought to care about. By default, most of us care and spend most of our time thinking about ourselves, our friends, and our family. Many of us also advocate for causes benefiting our local communities, communities of identities we hold, and our country. But do the lives of people halfway across the world, of a different race, nationality, or religion, matter any less than the people within our conventional boundaries? I don't think so. When we include all humans in our circle of caring, we may realize that, in comparison to local issues, many global issues affect many more people, much more severely, and are much easier to address. Similarly, are humans the only species that is worthy of moral concern? Or the only being whose suffering and well-being matter? When we include tens of billions of animals or more in our circle of caring, we see how large and neglected animal welfare concerns are. And lastly, how should we think about the well-being of future generations, who will have to deal with the consequences of our society's myopic actions, but have no say in the political decision-making that will impact their quality of life and even their likelihood of existing? It is for these reasons that global poverty, animal welfare, and improving the long-term future are such high priority causes in Effective Altruism. I'll briefly narrow in on long-termism, the idea that the primary determinant of action's moral value is their impact on the long-term future. Although unintuitive, it's a cause many EAs care about for two main reasons. First, future humans are morally important, since the circumstances of people's birth, including when they were born, shouldn't lessen their importance. Second, there could easily be an immense number of people in the future. I'll elaborate on the second point. If each person in this graphic represents around 10 billion people, humanity has had around 100 billion people who've lived before us in the past, and around 10 billion alive today. When we think about the number that could exist in the future if humanity survives and flourishes, the number is way beyond what we can comprehend. This is why for many EAs, a central priority is improving the long-term future. Promising ways of doing so include reducing existential risk, improving the trajectory of the future, for example, by reducing the likelihood of international conflict, researching global priorities, and doing advocacy work. Next, I'm going to talk about some other considerations that many find helpful for increasing impact. As many of us are Americans and consume primarily American media, it can be easy to forget about issues outside the US. However, on a global scale, even poor Americans tend to be far better off than many people elsewhere in the world. The median American household income per person is $32,000, which puts us comfortably in the top 10% of the global income distribution, while the median top US university graduates income puts us in the global top 1%. We are the 1%, which means we have a really big opportunity to help the other 99%. Another way of thinking that can help us assess the impact of our actions is asking ourselves, what would happen otherwise if I don't do this? For example, maybe you're thinking about becoming a doctor in the US to help people. It might seem intuitive that you'll be helping all of your patients, but many talented students want to become doctors. So if you don't become a doctor, it's likely that someone who's almost as good as you would be helping those patients anyway. In contrast, if you become a doctor in a place that has a shortage of doctors, or work in some other area with a shortage of skilled, altruistic people, you'll be able to support more people who would otherwise not have received support. Another important consideration for increasing impact is the opportunity cost of our actions. It's useful to ask ourselves, how does the value of my action compare to the value of the best thing I could have done instead? The current pandemic offers a grim but useful example of this being applied. When hospitals are overwhelmed by the number of patients seeking treatment and do not have the resources to treat everyone, they have to make harsh but necessary trade-offs to decide how to use their limited resources. They often have to prioritize based on who is most likely to survive and who has the most years of healthy life left if they are saved. Not because every tragedy isn't worth avoiding, but because we can't avoid every tragedy. So if we don't allow the least terrible tragedies to happen, we'll be allowing worse ones to happen. Our time and money are limited, so Effective Altruism Project, a project I invite you to join, is figuring out how we can most effectively use our limited resources to improve the world. These ideas about the opportunity cost of our action, our limited time and money, when internalized, can be challenging. Quite a few people who have grappled with them have felt a strong urge to devote all their time and money to giving support to those who desperately need it. But this can't be a sustainable approach sometimes. From the testimonials of people who have tried, being really hard on yourself to the point of burning out can make it so much harder for you to help people over the long term. An analogy I find helpful is what they always say in airplanes: put on your own oxygen mask before helping others. To clarify another idea, effective altruist is shorthand for someone who's trying to be effective at altruism. We still have so much to learn, individually and collectively. We sometimes fall short of how we want to live, but this isn't a reason to abandon our ideals. It's why we need them. What is important is that we keep learning, growing, and continue looking for even better opportunities to improve the world. Recap a little bit of what we've gone over so far. It's important to prioritize between different causes and determine which ones have the largest impact. One helpful framework for this is comparing problems along dimensions of scale, neglectedness, and solvability. We also discussed expanding our circle of compassion to people all over the world, to animals, and to future generations. To finish up, we'll discuss some more concrete actions we can take to apply EA lessons to our lives. The most impact-relevant decision we will make is probably how we'll spend the approximately 80,000 hours of our working lives. For this reason, I recommend checking out the website, 80,000hours.org. 80,000 Hours conducts research to find which careers have the largest positive social impact and provides career advice based on that research. Along with career choice, another high impact decision is how we donate our money. Our choices about where we donate our money and how we engage our friends, family, and network to donate can have a lot of impact. According to a study by the Founders Pledge, donations to the most effective climate charities, all the way on the right, kind of hard to read. Donations to the most effective climate charities are drastically more effective at reducing carbon emissions than other more popular inventions, such as changing our consumption habits. On the topic of donation, many effective altruists sign the Giving What We Can pledge. a commitment to donating 10% of their income or more to cost-effective charities. Lenny and I both signed this pledge. If anyone wants to talk about it, motivations, I think it's a pretty interesting initiative. There's always more to learn. So we have books in the back for learning, and we'll also be having a fellowship soon. Feel free to grab free copies of the book more, and Max will talk more about that fellowship in a second. We hope EAUWMadison can be a hub for people interested in these ideas. We'll have regular meetings, discussion groups, career workshops, and socials. Most relevant right now, though, we'll be hosting an 8-week introduction to EA fellowship that Max can talk a little bit.
All right, hello everyone. So my name is Max. I came across Effective Altruism probably like 2 years ago. It's been super influential to me. It's made me change a lot of my plans for my career, and been helping out Lenny and Mikhail run the club. So I'm going to talk about the fellowship today. The fellowship is going to be like the core programming for the first kind of the fall semester for our club. It's popular, or was popularized by the Stanford EA chapter, and then a bunch of Ivy Leagues started to do it. Essentially, it's a weekly 5 to 6 person small group discussion on top of about an hour of reading. So the reading will take place. The hour of reading isn't brutal. It's about 8 minutes a week, so pretty reasonable. And there's a brief application that's due on the 30th. So I recommend everyone apply. In our excellence, we're looking for people who are altruistic, which you guys definitely are because you're interested in the club. Open-minded, willing to engage in discussion, and then people who are able to devote 1 hour to a meeting once a week for about 8 weeks, and then another hour to read. So next up, why should I apply? So I think the main reason I want you all to apply is it's a very solid resume builder. I know Lenny and Mikhail has on their LinkedIn. A bunch of Ivy Leagues put these on, so there's a certain amount of prestige attached to them. And then it also just gives solid evidence to your employer that you are interested in making the world a better place, which I think can be really powerful. Next, can build kind of a community. I've tried to talk about effective altruism to my friends, and it's pretty difficult because some of the ideas are a bit esoteric. So it's really, I'm really excited personally just to be around people who kind of know these ideas and have sort of a place to discuss them. And then lastly, and most importantly, the reason these fellowships are popular and the reason we're putting them on is because we genuinely believe that learning about EA causes is how college students can do the most. Like Lenny was saying, donations to effective charities can be 10 to 100 times more effective than other interventions. And learning about these cause areas and then shaping your career to align with them can just give you a massive ability to improve the world. In addition, kind of gives you the ability to spread these ideas to your family and friends if you're really affected by them. And then again, just sort of multiply your impact. So now we'll go over some of the curriculum in this course. We took the course from the Ivy League schools, the same course that Stanford's running. So the first 2 weeks are going to be pretty similar to what was discussed today, except in a bit more depth. In the third week, we talk about expanding our moral circle. Why should we care about people in other countries, animals, future generations? Then in week 4, 5, and 6, we get into long-termism. Why should we use our charity money now to improve the long-term future rather than save the lives of many people who are suffering today? Week 5, 6, talk about existential risk. We talk about how much value you can bring by just decreasing the chance of an existential risk by less than 1%. And then week 6, we are going to get into 2 emerging technologies that will have a high potential to shape our future: artificial intelligence and advances in biotechnology. They'll have a high extinction rate over the next, or high extinction threat over the next century, and also just have a good chance to shape our future. Week 7, we'll talk about some critiques of effective altruism. And then on week 8, we'll be holding a career workshop. We're going to bring in a speaker and we'll try and get some hands-on work with career guides, deciding how we can use our careers to do the most good. That's all. I really encourage everyone to apply to the fellowship. And
Yeah, thank you, Max. Clarify, while you can put this on your resume, I would say the most important reason to do this is to, help people. So that's why we're here for the most part. It's our goal. But I just want to just quickly recap by saying, like, this has been my time in effective altruism, which has maybe over a year and a half now. I mean, it happened very quickly, has been a testament to me for the power of good ideas and how when you stumble on certain underlying philosophical ideas that you feel pull you strongly, there's no better place to kind of turn that into action and a real positive impact, I hope. And so I encourage you all to kind of engage with these ideas more. And a really good way to do that is the fellowship. Are there any questions about any of the topics we covered or the fellowship, which will be from October 4th? That's the deadline to apply is September 30th. And it'll start kind of the following week. Thank you. Yeah.
In like one of the emails, I saw the like different topics, it's like global poverty, climate change, stuff like that.
Mhm.
Are there like multiple fellowships on like different topics, or are those just the topics of the single fellowship?
Yeah, so that's all in the same fellowship. The readings kind of alternate between like books and like different forum posts and blog posts. So a lot of those topics do get touched. And like Max mentioned, is one of the things we are very interested in are existential risks. And so we definitely do talk about the Precipice, which is a book that you get for free if you do the fellowship, and we'll be reading parts of. The purpose of that entire book is basically to look at like what are the emerging technologies or the technologies that exist right now that like really have the capacity to inflict great suffering / extinguish our species. And so some of those, like we mentioned in the kind of email, include like biorisk, extreme end climate change, nuclear war, AI, superintelligence. And so we'll be looking at those very, very briefly, though there's whole books to these things. And if one of those particularly interests you, we can connect you with a good book on that subject. Mm-hmm.
So buy-in from professors for the
Yeah, so good question. This is our second year on campus. And last year was just 2 people in organizing. I will say we have some connections in the philosophy department as well as like physics department. But that's a big goal of ours too, is to kind of get some of this. If you're interested in, for example, using the EI ideas to do a research project or something, we really do want to set up a kind of a network of faculty here working on causes that are very aligned, or at least somewhat aligned with some of these problems. So I know, for example, we have a synthetic biology program here at Madison, and synthetic biology is will be a technology that has a really high potential to do really good things, but also to do really bad things like engineer a pandemic. And so if you're interested in doing research on that, we can definitely be a facilitator for reaching out to faculty members. And that goes for a lot of the cause areas that we've talked about today. Mm-hmm.
So for the club, outside of the fellowship and reading
Yep.
discussions, is there any like community service aspect involved, like locally, or?
Yeah, stay tuned for that. I think one thing that we've been talking about is a plasma drive. And there's some folks here that would love to talk to you about that if that's something you're interested in. So that idea would be giving plasma once a week or something like that. And then, as an idea, using the money that you get from that to donate to an effective charity. But we are kind of focused on this fellowship right now, and we will be doing like socials in between and kind of discussing some of these ideas, because we really do believe that the biggest things that you can do to have an impact are big steps, like picking a career in a certain area, and so we don't do it. We haven't in the past focused a ton on doing local stuff here, but we always do welcome great ideas like food rescue or plasma drives. And we're happy to organize that in conjunction with someone else as well. So come to us with your good ideas.
Who facilitates the fellowship?
Yeah, so that will be a mix of the kind of organizer group here, and everyone that facilitates will have done the fellowship in the past and will be very qualified, I dare say. Yeah, fellowships are a great experience. I did 2 of them already, and I facilitated one, and I'm really looking forward to doing these in person if you so want. That's a question on the application. I mean, it's just like, it's a time once a week to chat about big things, and that can be actually quite fulfilling and fun to do with other students as well. Any other questions? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely. You're talking to a future organizer of the EAUWMadison Meditation Club. And so I know that's a personal interest that many people here have. And I'm sure that there's a lot of the whatever philosophical aspects can be explored there as well further, but we haven't done a group meditation or anything yet. But we can definitely. Yeah, thank you. Any other question? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, did you say the reading time commitment for the fellowship was like 1 hour a week? It's not that long.
No, it's not bad at all. And if you are feeling particularly motivated, you will find much more than 1 hour of reading to you available on the curriculum.
I imagine it's interesting stuff.
It is, at least to me. It's,
To know how reading we've been doing anyway.
all right. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, please just come mingle with us. We'll be staying here for like the next 15 minutes at least. Check out some of the books. And yeah, like I said, if you have any questions, please just come find